This is Michael, and I'm going to read some poetry to you. Some of it's mine, some of it's people you know. I want to talk about what led me to be a poet, though I've been writing in poetry for most of my life. I don't have to wipe my eyes. Sorry. It's early in the morning for me. I've been up for a while, but you wash your face and you get all ready to do this. And I decided to go live, so I couldn't go back and delete this and go, whoops. It's high time. I'd like to put out a special thank you to Matt. I'm going to butcher your name, D. Avelia and Peter Hollins, both of which, in their own ways, have led me to make this decision to do this. Start making videos. I've been on YouTube pretty much since the beginning, and just like I've been on the internet pretty much since the beginning. I was here before it was the World Wide Web. I didn't do much with it other than just be an explorer. Along the way, I learned to create and so forth. But today, we're having coffee, and today's coffee is brought to you by my niece, Karen Rice, who's a school teacher in Blount County, Tennessee. And it's Starbucks Breakfast Blend. And as it turns out, it's not so bad. Of course, I added sugar. So, I wanted to start with the poem that led me to taking this on. A little background. My mother, who was 79 and a little over a month, passed away January 17th from what they would call natural causes. She had gotten a UTI, and it just so quickly. And all the dreams and all the hopes you have and all the plans you thought you were going to have and all the conversations you thought you were going to have just go away, and they're gone. And death is so sudden in some ways. I was blessed with having some time to prepare to go through it, um, to see her pass peacefully. And I know so many people in this country have lost their loved ones over this last year. So many unnecessary deaths, and so it's so tragic. And but I'll get back to that another time. My mother loved poetry, and the last few years I would excuse me, I would spend time reading poetry to her every night, and before we read the Bible and prayed. And so I want to start with a poem that meant a lot to her and is kind of the reason I'm here. And maybe you can see what the message is that led me to this. The poem is called A Psalm of Life, and it's by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Let's scroll. Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way, but to act, that each tomorrow find us farther than today. Art is long and time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. In the excuse me, I screwed that one up. In the world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac of life, be not like dumb driven cattle, be a hero in the strife. Trust no future, however pleasant, Let the dead past bury its dead. Act, act in the living present, heart within and God overhead. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. Footprints that perhaps another, sailing o'er life's main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother, seeing shall take heart again. Let us then be up and doing, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait. Cell phone on silent when you're trying to record. eBay decided to let me know they've sold something of mine. Anyway, at the risk of and temptation of rereading that, since I screwed it up, I'd just like to talk about this poem and what it means to me. It was one of my mother's favorites. I spent a lot of my life dealing with depression, and it's what led me to poetry. Uh, uh, Ironically, at one time, to the statement that if I wasn't depressed, I couldn't write poetry, which is an utter and ridiculous lie that poets and many people tell themselves. Poetry can be very cathartic, but if you're really a poet, it's in your soul. It's like breathing. You cannot go a day without breathing poetry, words, reaching out to touch the things that are deep in your heart and you want to share with others. So, um, in a psalm of life, it's live in the present, uh, look to the future, remember the past, but don't dwell any place but the present. There was a spoken word group that I liked a long time ago. They're mostly out of print. They were called Celestial Navigations, and it was a quirky trio of musicians and a reader. And in one of his pieces, which if I can find it down the road, I'll either play it or read it, since I'll probably get hit with a copyright strike by somebody out of the woodwork. But in it, his wife is asking him, "What is the best moment?" And the speaker sits and he ponders and he wonders and he wonders and he wonders, and it finally dawns to him that the best moment is the next moment spent with the one you love. And I don't have anybody other than family now, but I treasure each and every moment that I spent with my mother at the end, reading her poetry to her. I didn't get to read much of mine. I don't know, she just never wanted to hear it except on occasion. I guess she didn't understand a lot of it. She always would tell me that I was a good poet, and that was helpful because the last thing you want to hear from your mother is, well, your poetry sucks. But so, in the interest of moving on, I want to show you a book that I bought for my mother. Uh, it is 101 famous, and I bought this for my mother back Valentine's Day 2009, and I wrote in the front cover, "To my mother, herein lies the poems and prose with the experiences and feelings of your own. The answer lies on page 108. Your son, the poet, Michael." And inside the cover also is two of her favorite quotes. The first one is, "An unexamined life is not worth living." And supposedly Socrates said it. And then, "Poetry is the spontaneous overflow of feelings," which is by our recent poet, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Or, okay, it's not. It's by Williams Wordsworth. I'm going to get in trouble. Anyway, so I'm going to read the poem that's on page 108, and many of you will recognize it. It's the poem that changed my life and continues to change my life. It's If by Rudyard Kipling. If you can keep your head when all about you, all. Let me try that again. If by Rudyard Kipling. If you can keep when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you and make allowances for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken and stoop and build them up with worn out tools, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, if you can force your heart, whoops, and never breathe a word about loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they're gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, if all men count with you, whoops, here we go. If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything in it. And what is more, you'll be a man, my son. Not the best reading. We'll work on that. Um, I have dyslexia, so sometimes I get the words wrong. Sometimes I just put in my own words, and I can't seem to stop myself. Probably comes from being me. Uh, so a little about myself. I am a South African born American, or an American born South African. My mother was from East Tennessee, and my father was born in South Africa, but he also was the same as me. He was a child of a South African and an American. My grandmother being from Detroit, and a first generation Irish immigrant was her mother. So it's kind of convoluted. But my father was born in South Africa. So I was born in South Africa in 1969. My mother had agreed to marry my father and came to South Africa and married him. And my brother popped out a few years later, and then I came along to finish up my mother's children. And so I'm the youngest, and at one time at least the best looking. Then I got big and bald. Still pretty gorgeous, but um, we kind of lived a scattered life. By the time I was 4, we were leaving South Africa and coming to the U.S., and fate intervened on my father and mother's plans, and we ended up settling in Knoxville, Tennessee, where we would spend the next 7 years, I guess, living here when whimsy and ill thought out plan went into motion, and my father and mother had decided to move my brother, my sister, and her three kids back to South Africa in 1980, and we made a very roundabout way there. My sister and her three kids got to go straight there and then spend some quality time in Zimbabwe with a friend. And we went all over the United States in the meantime, eventually hooking up with my grandparents and going around the world. So that changed my life quite a bit. But we landed in South Africa, and I'm never really sure how long we were there. It felt like forever, but it might have been just 4 years. It mostly was a time of disappointment for my parents, who did not find the life that they expected to find when they got there and had to adapt to the life that they ended up with. My mother did end up starting an international school for Americans primarily, but also other foreigners. And and then my brother graduated from high school, so my mother packed up myself, my brother, and my sister and her three kids, and we all dropped back to the United States. A more direct route this time. And unbeknownst to me and my family, my father decided to stay behind, uh, ostensibly to close up the properties and sell them and bring the money and come on to the States. But that was not his plan, because he had decided to take up with his secretary and follow his own path. And it would take 2 years or more, it might have been three, before all of that was finalized. And I discovered that my happy family was not as happy as I thought it was. And for the most part, I've lived in the U.S. ever since, primarily in Knoxville, Tennessee, though on a flight of whimsy. Again, my part. My mother had decided she wanted to have a farm when she retired, and we moved to a tiny little place called Luttrell, Tennessee, which is 26 miles north of Knoxville, and I've been here ever since, almost 23 years now. And it's where I live now. It's where I will continue living for the foreseeable future. It's not ideal, but it's idyllic. It's quiet, uh, unless, of course, there's a sale down at Kmart on ammo or Walmart, and which is not true anymore, but it was. And we'd have World War II, the neighbors competing to see who could shoot the most bullets at the same time. Still, it was a good life. It has been a good life. There's a lot of things that I have a collar. Maybe I didn't button my shirt right. No, no, I guess I'm okay. I'm very self-conscious, as you probably may have guessed by this point. Anyway, so that's how I came to be where I am. I am a South African and an American, and even after working for the U.S. Census, no one made me choose between one and the other. I don't even know how you'd go about choosing, but I supposedly have dual citizenship. And um, I mean, everybody says it. I've never seen it in paper, so I don't know if it is. It is an official thing. Um, I've never been a full time poet. I'd like to be a full time writer. I don't see becoming poet laureate. My poetry is really not the poetry that would get you invited to the White House so you could read something all inspiring to all the Americans who ever is getting into power that um, term of office. But my hat's off to those that have made it that far and continue to make it. I have written an enormous amount of poetry over the years, some long form, uh, but more recently, in the last 5 years, primarily short form. I chose my main poetry platform to be Twitter, which of course started out at 158 characters or less, and then we got to move up to 240 characters. But it's still a pretty short poem format, and I have adapted to that and work well within that. Um, I have been threatening to create a book of poetry ever since I wrote one for my mother's best friend. So, which leads me to the person who has inspired me to at least start looking at writing my own stuff. Um, a big shout out goes to him. You know, he did do what he could for me. I wish I could have done more with him, and maybe one day we can collaborate. But that's Peter Hollins, the singer. He I became his patron on Patreon. Wonderful terms. Uh, Quite a few years ago, and I've moderately tried to support him and his work, and I'm glad to see that he's had continued success doing it. And he definitely tried to help me, though until now, I really wasn't in the position to pursue that, having had to take care of my mother for the last few years of my life, and the last 6 months, in particularly full time. So uh, I'd like to just give a big shout out to him for helping me find a voice and the determination to start this. I'd like to finish with the Poet's Corner, which I don't have the cover, which was compiled and put together by John Lithgow, and I like this. This is one of the finest books of poetry put together in my experience. Um, I wish I could say I had a poem right on the top of the thing, but I just want to talk about how he put it all together, and then I guess I'll end with a whimsical note from one of my favorite poets of my own. Um, One of the things that appeals to me about the Poet's Corner, other than the incredible audio recorded version of it, both on Audible, which I am a member, and maybe one day they'll sponsor my videos. That's a nice dream. Um, I'm going to reach out to my Facebook page here. Uh, I have multiple monitors. I'm one of those power PC users. I'm talking to you on the middle monitor, and there's one over here, one over there, and technically one back there. That's the Xbox station back there. Uh, but John Lithgow put together his favorite poems into a book, and I'd like to do that one day. And then maybe I can get all my friends who are totally not famous and probably don't have all that thrilling voices. But maybe Morgan Freeman would give me a good solid read something along with. People on YouTube that I would like to mention now because they are very inspiring to me and have helped me come to this and formulate this. And I'd like to give a shout out to them. I'm going to list them in no particular order, but they all are inspiring people, and they have captured something that has spoken to me for the last few years. And I would like to start with the YouTuber that is most important to me, just by virtue of me um, being here the longest, and that is Philip DeFranco. I started watching him back when he was Sexy Phil or SXE Phil, and I've pretty much stuck with him ever since. And followed him from one thing to the other. And I usually do trust him, though his judgment has not always been the best. But he does the news, and he does some He's done social commentary, but I like his new thing, news for that matters most to people who want it or something like that. He's got a great new little phrase. He's a visionary, and what has inspired me the most about Phil is how he's organized his company each time. He's always thought outside the box and come up with a format that appeals to the most people, and has been very good at executing it. And then I would also like to recognize Casey. I'm going to mispronounce his name, Neistat, because he is just in my book is just a visionary filmmaker. I don't always like his content, but I always appreciate his art, and I always like the way he films things. He's always makes whatever he's doing appealing, which a lot of what he does is appealing. I have to say that, and all the people that are associated with him. And I'd like to uh, uh, also mention that other Colin Furs, who is a backyard inventor mechanic. I'm probably going to sneeze here. Excuse me. Um, and Hammer Smith, I guess his name's Hammer Smith. I just picked him up recently, and of course Adam Savage, same kind of thing. Um, I'd like to thank the guy who does freaking reviews. I really enjoyed his stuff lately, and even have bought some of the things he recommends. And boy, I hope I don't regret it. uh, but in fact, a lot of things that are on my desk in front of me are the direct result of somebody recommending things. So, like my favorite earbuds of all time are Raycons. I don't use them much, but when I do use them, I use Raycons. And Casey Neistat, sorry, recommended the camera that I'll eventually use when I start filming, which is the Canon GX70. I'd have to turn around and look at it. Um, Linus Tech Tips changed my life where I build computers, and I built computers probably longer than Linus has been alive, but I really appreciate his work. Tom Scott, I just adore Tom Scott. He's always going places I'd like to go, and he's always talking about things in interesting ways. Uh, the way, and I can't pronounce the guy who made the marble machine, but boy, Winter Garden and the marble machine. If you ever want to be inspired to take on the most impossible task known to man, and work on it and work on it and work on it, it's definitely worth checking him out. Uh, I guess I would be amiss if I didn't mention some of my favorite singers. Kawahi, I hope I said that right. I love your music. Dodie, or she used to be known as Dodie Clark. I guess she's earned just being Dodie. Tessa Violet, I've supported them all the way through. I still support Tessa. Heather Dale, of course, Peter Hollins, Home Free. There's just so many YouTubers that I reach out to every day, and they're always there. And I can't always remember your names, especially when I'm doing this without reaching back through. But let me give you a little sample of the kinds of things I write. And one of the things that is most appealing to me is the I like to be visual in my writing. So a lot of my poetry involves art and photographs. And I'll put a link below in case you want to look and see what my poetry is like. But I have a website. It's michaelwrites.net, and it's got links to pretty much everything I've ever written. It's sadly out of touch, um, but I have. It's got my poetry and a lot of my fiction and links to the blogs that until last year I was rather a lot of. Um, but let me see if I've got some things here I can do. Now, as I said, a lot of what I write is linked with pictures, not all my own, but uh, anyway, sorry. I'm kind of looking for something that uh, was particularly good. Uh, I don't know. I'm not having much luck here. Um, let's see. So I'll read this one to you because it actually got quite a few likes. If I can find it. Okay. This is about the sword and the stone. I wrote it January 5th, 2021. Some old sword thrust into a rock, remains of a courtyard, overtaken by the very nature that forged it eons ago, found by a youth no older than he is tall. 'Twas the legend I told you all. If you want it now, it's still thriving, but I might suggest you get better at diving. It's about Excalibur. If you haven't figured that out, a lot of my poetry is a bit tongue in cheek. Um, here's one I wrote December 25th, 2020. It's called Churning. Churning. Butter lover undercover like a storm tossed ship on boiling seas churning. My stomach catapults with desire for some fresh cheese. Churning. Some mad Amish paradise cut me another slice. I don't want to churn it twice. Thanks to Weird Al for that one. Another truly inspiring guy. Anyway, I'm going to finish this live stream up. I notice I have humongous audience, but I'll read you one of my favorite poets, who is Edward Lear. The Owl and the Pussycat. The owl and pussycat went to sea in a pea green. Uh, sorry, let me try that again. The owl and the pussycat. The owl and the pussycat went to sea in a beautiful pea green boat. They took some honey and plenty of money wrapped up in a 5 pound note. The owl looked up to the stars above and sang to a small guitar, "Oh, lovely pussy, oh, pussy, my love, what a beautiful pussy you are. You are, you are, what a beautiful pussy you are." Pussy said to the owl, "You elegant fowl, how charmingly sweet you sing. Oh, let us be married, too long we have tarried, but what shall we do for a ring?" They sailed away for a year and a day to the land where the bong tree grows, and there in a wood a piggy wig stood with a ring at the end of his nose. His nose! His nose with a ring at the end of his nose. "Dear pig, are you willing to sell for 1 shilling your ring?" said the piggy. "I will." So they took it away and were married the next day by the murky. "Dear pig, are you willing to sell for 1 shilling your ring?" said the piggy. "I will." So they took it away and were married the next day by the turkey who lives on the hill. And they dined on mince and slices of quince, which they ate with a runcible spoon. And hand in hand on the edge of the sand, they danced by the light of the moon. The moon, the moon. They danced by the light of the moon. Edward, Edward Lear, my hero, along with The other whimsical poets of the age, Ogden Nash and that guy, T.S. Eliot. Um, I'm going to end the stream now. This will officially end my first coffee, which I haven't drunk much, but here I'll drink some. And mention my other hero, Oxhorn. Wherever you are out there, Oxhorn, this one's for you. Anyway, I'd like to thank all the people who made this possible and my sponsor of the week, Deadpool, because who the hell else would sponsor me? Thank you. I will see you later.